John Roberts today, who was on the other side yesterday with the 5 on the other side of this case. He said this court is not a legislature. Whether same-sex marriage is a good idea should be of no concern to us. Under the Constitution, judges have power to say what the law is, not what it should be. Now that'll be a little confusing to some people who read his opinion yesterday and feel like the court did decide yesterday what the law should be in upholding those Obamacare subsidies. He goes on to say the people who ratified the Constitution authorized courts to exercise neither force nor will, but merely judgment. So it'll be interesting to compare his decision from yesterday with today, where he is now opposing Justice Kennedy. They needed 5 votes. They got them. But again, the Chief Justice now today railing against the majority for their decision to find that same-sex marriage is now legal in all 50 states. There are no limitations on that anymore, Martha.
Hey, Shannon, you make a great point because it appears that the Chief Justice in this case is being very specific in terms of the words and saying it is not for us to decide whether or not this is ethical or whether or not this is a good decision for the country. We must go based on what the Constitution says when it comes to discrimination. Whereas yesterday, the suggestion was in the reading of a Chief Justice's interpretation for the Obamacare decision, he basically suggested that because the health care law was intended to be good for everybody, that it was not for the court to mess with it, essentially. So a very different approach in these two cases from the Chief Justice, and that's going to be scrutinized very closely, Shannon.
It is. He goes on to say the court takes the extraordinary step of ordering every state to license and recognize same-sex marriage. He says many people will rejoice at this decision. There are thousands of them here, as you've heard this morning. And he says, I begrudge none their celebration, but for those who believe in a government of laws, not of men, the majority's approach is deeply disheartening. He says supporters of same-sex marriage have achieved considerable success persuading their fellow citizens through the democratic process to adopt their view. We know a number of states, either it's been done by the legislature or people voting at the polls. He says that ends today. 5 lawyers have closed the debate and enacted their own vision of marriage as a matter of constitutional law. So confusing and interesting to read this decision from the Chief Justice as opposed to what we heard from him yesterday. Legal scholars are going to be poring over these 2 back-to-back opinions very closely and trying to figure out if they're really written by the same man. I got to tell you, it's an interesting contrast to what we heard from the Chief yesterday.
All right. We are continuing to cover this breaking news story from the Supreme Court today. Yet another decision has come down. There were 2 huge decisions that we waited for over the course of this week, and now we have the second one, which is on same-sex marriage. And Chief Justice Roberts voting very differently in the way that he has approached these 2 issues, and that is going to get quite a bit of scrutiny as we continue to pour through these decisions and watch what is going on from the Supreme Court.